are low-budget travelers. A few years back, we wanted to take our kids to visit Carlsbad Caverns as part of a cross-country adventure. Well, the only accommodations near the park were out of our price range. We had heard that it is legal to camp anywhere on land owned by the Federal Bureau of Land Management. And our AAA map showed this huge expanse of desert right nearby marked BLM. Bingo! We drove out a rugged dirt track and pitched our tent on the dusty hardpan. We made and ate supper, but before going to bed, I realized I would need to use the restroom. Number 2. The closest restroom was over the horizon. Now, we are veteran campers, enough to know that in these eastern woodlands of Pennsylvania, it is proper to bury one's bodily waste at least 6 inches deep. But in the high desert, proper disposal involves leaving it to dry in the sun. Out of both habit and privacy, I strolled some distance from our campsite before taking care of business, marveling at the incredibly dense star field above me. Now, at this point, you're probably thinking this story involves a painful encounter with a cactus. But no, while there were plenty of prickly plants around, this story's magic begins the next morning. As we packed up in the bright morning sun, we saw something you cannot see in Pennsylvania. At different times, 4 large beetles came through our campsite area, each pushing a dusty little marble along the ground, following perfectly straight tracks. And those tracks exhibited a strange pattern. They seemed to radiate out from a single point. Guess what point? Mystified, we followed their paths in reverse, encountering dozens of similar beetles racing out in all directions from the now completely bare spot where I had squatted the night before. How did they find it? Where were they going? It was astounding and unnerving, and made a lasting impression on us and our kids. I now know that dung beetles need those precious brown marbles to feed and nurture their own children, and they only get one shot at it. This happened long before I started thinking in earnest about science and spirituality, but it was an intimate and visceral lesson in the ways I am connected to the world around me, especially the living world. Now, I hate to disappoint, but this is not a sermon about dung beetles. It is about the science of unity and oneness. You might expect science to be a big party pooper when it comes to unity and oneness, the know-it-all who ridicules all that kumbaya stuff in favor of cold, hard reality. Well, play along with me here, and let's see what science has to say about unity and reality. Let's start at the beginning of time. According to the best evidence science has to work with so far, the universe began as a singularity. What an interesting name given today's topic of oneness. There's a reason it's called that. The singularity at the beginning of time contained everything in today's universe, but compacted infinitely dense, so that everything in the universe had no volume, no size at all. Everything was one thing, infinitely small and infinitely dense. The Reverend Carol Martinaccio calls it the everything seed, the seed which grew into everything. Nobody knows what came before the beginning of time. But all the evidence we have now says that at the beginning of time, that tiny speck rapidly expanded or inflated, creating space and time as it did. Everything in the universe, from this morning's service to interstellar dust in the most distant galaxies, is traceable back to that one single thing at the beginning of time. Everything that is an object, as well as all the things that are energies or events, or that are still mysterious like dark matter, has a common origin, a shared genesis in the Big Bang singularity. So how did we get so separate, so diverse? Well, 45 years ago, Joni Mitchell sang, "We are stardust, we are billion-year-old carbon." Well, it's literally true. You want to know the details? Yeah? At the beginning of time, there was only energy. No atoms, no matter, no mass, no space even. No solids, liquids, or gases. Nothing we would call a thing. There was only pure energy. Now, matter and energy are like nouns and verbs. Matter is stuff, things, objects. Energy is movement, action, ability, potential. So how did the universe make all this stuff if all it had to start with was light energy? Well, at extreme energy densities, matter can actually condense out of pure energy, out of light. And in the first moments of the Big Bang, particles that would later form atoms of hydrogen and helium condensed from extremely bright light. But that doesn't explain where all this stuff came from if all you have is hydrogen and helium to work with. Building bigger atoms from small ones requires extremely high temperatures like those inside the sun. And stars do this. They can fuse hydrogen and helium atoms into lithium and carbon and fluorine, larger atoms, and so on. But normal stars like the sun can't go any bigger. They can't go past iron in the table of elements. And anything that normal stars make just sits there in the star forever. You can't make a normal star into new planets or new solar systems. But there are a few very rare supermassive stars. They have to be at least 10 times the mass of our sun. And those stars do the same thing. They fuse elements up to iron, but at the end of their serviceable lives, they get hollowed out. And at some point, gravity causes them to collapse in on themselves. They implode. And that implosion creates incredible amounts of very compact energy. And then there's a rebound, and they explode outward again. But just in the moment of that implosion and rebound, energy densities are high enough to fuse or create all the other larger elements that make up the stuff in this room and the Earth itself, including our bodies. But then they explode all that stuff out into the surrounding space as hot dust, dust that later will cool, and gravity can collect back together into new solar systems, including new planets. So near here, in our region of space, about 10 billion years ago, a supernova star exploded, creating all the elements that make us and this room and the Earth up, and then seeded them out into the surrounding space. Not only are we stardust, but we're all from the same star. Here's a Hubble photo of a different supernova far, far away, and you can see the cloud of dust around it. This one happened a while ago, so the dust is visible, far away from here. So almost all of the atoms in your body right now were once part of that ancient supernova star. All the physical stuff you interact with is made of atoms, and those atoms all have a common origin, a shared journey that we are part of. So the seeds of you and me were present there at the dawn of time, and we are descended from stars just like those we see in the night sky. We're not only connected to events in the early universe, we are those events, still occurring, still unfolding. We are still one thing. With all our diversity, with all the different galaxies, stars, planets, and living beings, there's only one event here. It's us, we the universe, slowly unfolding in our vast and creative sojourn through time. So your life story, your body's life story at least, starts 13.8 billion years ago as blazing white light. Energy so pure and hot that simple atoms were squeezed into being like diamonds from smoke. Eons later, larger atoms were explosively forged in dying stars, atoms that now make up our solar system and others in this part of the Milky Way. Okay, got it. Common origins, common genesis. What about now? What can science say about oneness in our daily lives? So play with me a little bit. Think about someone who lived long ago and far away, any kind of famous person. You got somebody in mind? All right, now take a deep breath with me. You just breathed in over 13 sextillion air molecules. But here's the thing, over 700 million of those air molecules were also at some point inside the lungs of that famous person you thought of. The same is true of every person who ever lived. Not only the people, every animal that ever lived, every plant that ever lived, they're all right here in the atmosphere of this room with us today. Some of the oxygen molecules from that breath that you took a moment ago now are you. They are part of your body, alive in you. You may remember from high school that photosynthesis allows plants to make themselves, their bodies, out of carbon dioxide and water. We make ourselves out of carbon dioxide and water, directly or indirectly, so we too are made of those things. So let's take a closer look at water and carbon dioxide, these ingredients of our bodies. This is a diagram of the water cycle. I'm sure you've seen it before. Water evaporates from the ocean, becomes part of the atmosphere, drifts around, and then sooner or later rains or snows back down, and eventually melts and finds its way back to the ocean. But one of the things water does as it goes around this cycle is it spends time posing as human beings, including you and me. Every sip of water we take includes molecules that were recently posing as clouds, as waterfalls, as glaciers, and other living things. The living water is an important symbol in the Christian tradition, and we can find living water right here in our bodies. Water comes alive when we drink it. Water comes alive when we drink it. Something similar is true of the carbon dioxide cycle. Carbon, as it goes around its cycle, spends time posing as living things, but also as seashells and coal and limestone and concrete. Some of the carbon atoms posing as you right now this morning were gasoline in your car last winter. And now they're you, or part of you. Same thing is true of the nitrogen cycle, the oxygen cycle, the phosphorus cycle, all the elements that go into making living bodies. Every year, 98% of the atoms in your body get exchanged for new ones. Our bodies are like a standing wave on a river. You are not the matter in your body. You are the pattern that organizes that matter as it flows through. And the edges of that pattern are quite blurry for a lot of reasons, but one is because other living things flow through us too and become us temporarily as they do. On and inside our bodies, the bacterial cells outnumber our human cells 9-1. There are thousands of species, trillions of bacterial cells, all cooperating and competing with one another and with you, their host, all the time. They digest our food, they protect our skin and our internal linings, and recently micrologists have found that they have a strong influence on our hunger and our thirst, our food preferences, our weight, and even our emotions are partly determined by the species of bacteria living inside us. So is it me who loves cheesecake or we? The human cells in our bodies each contain dozens of mitochondria. A mitochondria is a subcellular organelle. It's the powerhouse of the cell. It turns sugars back into energy so we can do things. We now know that these mitochondria are actually the descendants of ancient bacteria, still operating cooperatively inside our human cells. Now, mitochondria have their own DNA, separate from the human DNA in your chromosomes. You got all your mitochondria from your mother, and she got them from her mother, and so on, matrilineally inherited. Paleogeneticists have been able to use the well-known mutation rate of mitochondrial DNA to determine that every human being alive today is the descendant of one woman who lived in Eastern Africa about 200,000 years ago. That's not a long time in the history of the earth. Every human being alive today has a common shared great-grandmother. Regardless of race, gender, ethnicity, doesn't matter. We all share a common grandmother. Look around at the people in this room. These are your cousins. There's only one family of people on this planet. And it's not just people. As Sarah alluded to in the children's message, we share half of our genes with bananas. All living things on this planet are related. We are part of a single, unbroken family tree stretching back 600 million years. Now, there are many more examples of our connection and unity from science. But the bottom line here is that we cannot separate ourselves from the earth. We are the earth. The earth is giving this sermon this morning, and the earth is sitting in those earthen chairs listening to it. We and it are us. One thing. One life. So there's only one story, 14 billion years long, and the characters in the story are completely interconnected on every level of existence. But what about the setting? What about space and time? A century ago, the great mystic and teacher Albert Einstein showed us that space and time are actually unitive, that though they appear different, in truth, they are a single expression of reality, space-time. A century later, one of the buzzwords in particle physics today is non-locality. We think of space-time as having a framework. Even if it bends and curves, there's a predictability to it. Things can be located, and two different locations are different. There's space between them, and that space is real. Excuse me. The separation is real, we think. Quantum entanglement calls all of that into question. And evidence is piling up that space-time is non-local, meaning that location has no meaning. I won't try to explain quantum entanglement this morning, you're welcome, except to say that two particles that are entangled seem to communicate with one another over long distances, instantaneously, faster than light. Another way to think about it is that entangled particles become a single object that can be in two places at the same time. Here's an image from a paper published last year in Physical Review Letters, the journal Physical Review Letters, with the title, quote, "How Space-Time is Built by Quantum Entanglement," end quote. Entanglement giving rise to space-time rather than happening in space-time. Science writer George Musser was recently quoted in Scientific American saying, quote, "Multiple branches of physics now suggest that, at a deeper level, there may be no such thing as place and no such thing as distance," end quote. Non-locality suggests that there's only one place here, one location, even after billions of years of cosmic expansion, as though we are still in a singularity, but somehow diversified. What science says about unity and oneness is that your life story and my life story and those of dung beetles and germs and worms and rocks and flocks of geese and the moons and the Pleiades and the distant galaxies' life stories are all the same story, because there's only one story and there's only one character in the story. We, us, the universe. I say this not as a prophet or a mystic, but as a hardcore, show me the evidence, mainstream science educator. 750 years ago, the mystic and poet Rumi wrote, "You are not a drop in the ocean. You are the entire ocean in a drop." So what do we do with this knowledge? Well, most of us will probably do what most people have done with new revelations in the past, which is forget them in the hustle and bustle of daily life, or at best relegate them to an hour or two on Sunday mornings. Honestly, I don't know what to do with this knowledge except to meditate on it, take it in, try to make meaning of it. For me, the first step is to use me less and we more. We the people, yeah, but also we Earth. We the universe. We reality. Like the bumper sticker, think globally, act locally. I try to think of myself as an expression of the universe, a tiny cell in the body of someone vast, ancient, benevolent, and dependent on me like I'm dependent on each of my own cells. I especially try to remember this when dealing with people who take advantage of me or people with extreme ideologies. We need those people to be us, just like a forest community needs both poisonous mushrooms and beautiful flowers to be a forest. It doesn't mean I shouldn't be politically active or maintain good boundaries. You know, my muscle cells and bone cells are completely different from one another, performing nearly opposite roles in my body. But I'd be a mess if my muscle cells convinced all my bone cells to become just like them. Just as there are feedback systems among cells in my body, I need to communicate my truth loudly and firmly. But I can do that with grace and compassion and respect, knowing that those people are part of me, part of we, part of a still evolving singularity of everything. Another thing we can do with this knowledge is just share it. You know, there's this running argument between atheists and religious believers for decades now about the existence of the supernatural. And more often than not, they both demonstrate values that are the exact opposite of the worldview and values they're advocating. So when people are spewing the same old arguments with the same old self-righteousness, I try to interject that there's plenty of reason for praise and gratitude that we can agree on. And maybe that's more important than our own personal vision of the ultimate, a vision which is certainly inadequate and incomplete at best. I've come to believe that this argument about the existence of God misses the whole point of a spiritual life, which is our relationship with the sacred and transcendent. It just doesn't matter to me whether you believe in a God or not. I want to know how you express your reverence, how you treat creation in all of its expressions. Arguments about who created it are a distraction, and I say a destructive one. So my last suggestion for what to do with this knowledge is to treat everyone and everything you encounter as an essential part of your largest self, because it is. Will you please join me in a spirit of meditation? We breathe in and out and in again. Every breath, a bridge of deep connection across perceived separations. We are embedded each essential to the existence of everything right now, connected in ways we have only begun to explore. Let us be mindful of our oneness, our wholeness, even amidst our astonishing diversity. Let our suffering, our joys, our griefs and conflicts, and all our perceived otherness serve an ultimate good, even when we are as ignorant of that wholeness as a bone cell inside us is ignorant of the songs we sing together. Let us be always aware of our inseparability with one another, with all our relations, our blue marble earth, ancient stars, and the pure white light of the dawn of time, now alive in us. Here, today, in this room, right now. Let us enjoy some connective silence together.